Good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Binghamton Local Development Corporation today on Thursday, September 22nd. First call of business is the approval of the minutes of the July 28th, 2022 regular meeting, which are in your packet. I'll give a moment to ask for a motion. Approve them?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. Thank you. And now we will have Rachel present the July and August financial report since we were given a vacation here in the month of August.
Okay, so let's start with the July report and start out on page 4. This is the restricted account. The end of month balance was $1,331,619.51. On the flip side of that page, I'll just draw your attention to the Mountain Fresh Dairy payment that came in. So those folks are technically paid off and are no longer going to be on our default list.
Oh.
On the next page, page 6, the UDAG account, the end of month balance was $1,234,678.93. And on the flip side, for the UDAG receivables, nothing major has changed except that it appears that PA Every didn't pay in July, but that's because she prepaid in June. So she is up to date. 142 Court Street still in default. And Champs, one of our COVID-19 loans, has paid off. So that does it for the July report. Skip to the August report. On page 4 for the restricted account, the end of month balance, which is also the end of our fiscal year, was $1,031,958.42. On page 6 for the UDAG account, the end of month balance was $1,241,469. On page 7, on the flip side for the UDAG receivables, let's see that we catch up PA Every, so she is, still all paid up, no problem there. Champs of Binghamton then overpaid after their loan was paid off, so we will return them their money. They had an automatic payment set up and didn't know when it ended. And that does it for the August report. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Rachel. According to the agenda, we have no old business. I just wanted to make sure anybody had any old business to discuss. So the new business for today is resolution 22-16, which is a resolution of the Binghamton Local Development Corporation to reduce the allowance for doubtful accounts for the BLDC restricted account to $205,835.84. And that is because of the Mountain Fresh Dairy payoff. So requesting a motion to approve this resolution.
Susan, before we do that, I'm not sure whether or not this really needs to be a resolution. I talked to Rachel and I was going through this. I think it's probably cleaner to do it as a resolution.
Okay.
But I also think we should backdate it to August or put this into effect as at the end of August.
When
it's the end of the year for
when
BLDC, so we fall underneath the year end.
Okay, so we'll make those modifications, and with those modifications, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, so on to the Strategic Priorities Committee report that we met yesterday. Yes.
So strategic priorities yesterday, we primarily talked about the DRI application, which is due Friday, the funding of which came through the BLDC. We have a pretty strong draft that we should be finalizing today or early tomorrow for submittal. We talked through it in a lot of detail in strategic priorities yesterday. We won't do that in public session today, but after it's submitted, I'm happy to share it with the directors for review. Next steps will be a presentation in front of the Regional Economic Development Council, where they haven't given us parameters for what that looks like yet, but we'll be presenting to them for consideration for the $10 million grant ask. A couple other things we talked about was that in the next few months, we're going to look to revise some of the policies for the BLDC as we've gone through different things in the past few months, the option agreement, different real estate transactions. We're looking to make it came to our attention that the policies that were adopted years ago don't really make sense for the BLDC. We adopted city policies that don't technically apply to us. So Rachel and I have been in communication with the statewide Economic Development Council that advises LDCs and IDAs about some assistance in getting our policies to line up with the Public Authorities Accountability Act. And get those all up to date so that we are in best practices with New York State. So you'll see those coming down the pike in the next few months. Shouldn't be anything surprising. It'll just give us a little bit more flexibility like LDCs should have to do the work we need to do. What was my final thing in strategic priorities? I can't remember what the third agenda item was. I apologize.
We spoke a little bit about new loan marketing.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Rachel.
Yep.
So we currently have, and Steve, feel free to jump in on this because this was an idea from your office. We currently have around $1 million in our revolving loan fund. Those are CDBG funds and they count against the city's allocation for our CDBG expenditures. So one of the things that has become increasingly apparent is that we need to spend down those funds or they're going to start impacting the city's ability to use our CDBG allocations. So one thing we talked about with Steve was not the creation of a new program, but just marketing our existing programs differently. We can lend up to $34,999 with the creation of one employee that can be a sole proprietor. And we can be pretty flexible on those terms based on the latitude that HUD has given us. So we're going to start actively marketing to folks that are sole proprietors, folks that are, bringing on one employee and trying to see if we can get some people who need to do tenant fit out of spaces that they're leasing, purchase of brick and mortar, purchase of materials and equipment, things like that. So like I said, not a new program, just a new way to market our existing programs. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, I just want to stress this to the BLDC. So the restricted loan account comes from CDBG monies, and those monies are specifically meant to help low-income people. One way you can do that, and it's sort of the purpose of the BLDC or the CDBG restricted loan monies, is to help businesses hire low-income people or help low-income people start businesses. So as we are very well aware, and I'm sure you're all aware, individuals that are in a low-income situation don't necessarily always have the best line of credit. But from HUD's perspective, they kind of don't care once the money goes out the door if a job is created. So I would encourage the BLDC to consider that when taking into account the risk of loans. My vision, as I've expressed it to Sarah and BLDC before, is that if you look at it as a way of helping low-income people that have a great business model but just don't have the money to start a project, that's one way you can really look at these monies. We could be helping people start businesses, lift themselves up out of poverty through their own ideas and thoughts and concepts and hard work. And you could really, you're looking at, let's think of someone who was recently divorced, a woman who had been a homemaker her entire life, recently divorced, has a great business model, brings to the BLDC, has no working capital. Someone who just graduated from college, had a great idea in engineering. We've had that with the incubator to help them, start a new business. You can even go beyond that. People that, spent time in prison. We don't typically like to think of helping these people, but someone paid their due to society in prison, came up with a great idea, so they're not going to return to prison. They would like to start a business. It all comes back down to, is the business plan solid? And that is what matters more than anything. And if they have a solid business plan, I think the risk can be upped. I think there's a more acceptable level of risk when it comes to these kinds of loans. So that's kind of the option I'm offering out there. It's a way for you to use this BLDC money to help that kind of situation. So.
And specifically, it would come from our revolving loan funds. We would still have probably a higher risk tolerance on our UDAG special project loans. And to Steve's point, I think the main crux of it is the difference between having a good business plan versus having good credit, having good cash flow, which are the things we traditionally look at and tend to be much more risk averse in folks that don't have good credit or great cash flow, but looking more at the business plan when it comes to these smaller dollar revolving loan fund. And ultimately, if we don't spend these funds, it impacts the city's ability to do other work with CDBG funds, nonprofit allocations, ADA, parks work, all the things that, tend to be very popular programs from the city.
So what kind of terms then?
It would be our normal revolving loan terms. At this point, we wouldn't be changing anything about the program. We would just be marketing it in such a way that people felt, because I've had people come to me and say, I've come to the BLDC before, my application was denied for reasons of having past incarceration history. And to be fair, I was not here at the time, so I don't know if these things are true, but this is just what's being expressed to me, that I had bad credit, that I, didn't have enough money in the bank, and so they weren't able to give me a loan. And I'm never going to go back to the BLDC because it's just not going to work out for me. So it's really just reaching out to folks who maybe feel like this is not a program for them or who have historically been denied funding and letting them know the opportunity exists with this board at this time to come back to the table and have those conversations.
And if I could add one more element to that, with CDBG monies, we're starting the next year of what would be fiscal year 49, which would start next September. We're starting up the plan for that. One thing you could do is if you feel like the risk is unacceptable, we can include elements similar to our home buyer program where we require someone who is going to get that assistance to have some sort of training, some sort of financial educational thing that can be covered by CDBG funds, regardless of whether they come and get a loan or not. So if you guys wanted to say, well, we'd like them to take this 3-week online, how to start a new business and succeed course, that can be paid for with CDBG funds if we allocate it in the next fiscal year. So that's just an option you could have there if you feel like just the risk in and of itself is too much. So there are ways you can add to it using even just CDBG funds to cover that kind of thing.
When do you usually finalize the plan for the next fiscal year, Steve?
Well, the mayor's office will make a final decision on budget in probably April.
Whenever you need me.
Once we get CDAC to make their initial recommendation, and then we go to the mayor's office for that, and that would be in the spring of next year.
Okay, so yeah, I think we'd be looking at this fall, early winter, early into next year timeline for determining if there's anything we want to ask for in the next fiscal year out of the CDBG allocation.
Be creative, absolutely be creative.
And
So
then
you can pay for expenses, but what can you cannot get in grants? You can pay, that's kind of like it's giving them a grant, I would say, but you can
Not
pay for
through-
their.
we can't do grants through revolving loan.
Not through revolving loan directly, but you could do it through CDBG, but that would be a request that would have to be done as the budgetary process itself.
And-
The revolving loan funds are flexible in that we don't need to allocate the funding in the action plan, but a grant would need to be allocated.
So that's something
But
where,
covering expenses, reimbursement is fine, is what you said? So paying for education is
Right.
fine, you said?
Yeah.
and I know we have the ability in our some of our paperwork to draw down the revolving loan fund to 500,000. So we have around $1 million in there.
Yeah.
If that was something we wanted to look at for the next action plan, this year we did it through an action plan amendment, which is kind of an onerous process.
Oh, yeah.
But if we decide that we want to draw down the
Yeah.
revolving loan fund to 500,000 and allocate the 500,000 to something else like grant programming or education programming, that's certainly something that this board can talk about. And I think we can make that an action item for strategic priorities to take for the next few meetings.
Makes sense.
That on the agenda for next
Fair. I
week.
think one thing that's important here, if you have some ideas that you think.
Yeah, I mean, we do this all the time. We do the same thing. It's just, if we can combine some of this together, it could be a big opportunity. I think.
And it really falls back into what the mayor's plan is, into the action plan that goes out next year. So if you have some ideas, sit down with Steve and put it together and say,
This makes sense.
he wants to add 50,000 to do this type thing, he can do that. But I think you really have to understand what it is. And I think most things we can probably fit into it, but it's a matter of understanding it.
I'll take that as an action item for strategic priorities for the next few months and see if we can add you to those meetings so that you can guide some of the recommendations and let us know what works and what doesn't work under the guidelines.
Absolutely.
That is all I have from strategic priorities. Anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to add in regard to the strategic priorities, this has been a, big lift for the team to put this application together, which is again due Friday. And we'll keep our fingers crossed because it would be a wonderful opportunity for the city for the Clinton Street corridor. And, I think we have a good shot based on everything that Sarah has said. So I just wanted to ask Sarah, what is the timing of, we heard a little bit yesterday that perhaps the mayor might accelerate this because, or the mayor, the governor, because it's an election year. Is there a possibility that we could hear by the year end?
I think there's a strong possibility we'll hear by year end. I think there's a smaller possibility we'll hear before the election. But I think it's either going to be we hear before the election or we don't hear until later in December. I can't imagine it would be announced, the week after the election. I'm sure she's prioritizing different programs, but I think a lot of that will depend on how quickly the REDC gets back to us and says we're scheduling presentations. If they turn right around and say we're doing it next week or 2 weeks from now, I think we'll see it sooner. If they push off, a month, we're probably looking more at the end of the year, early next year.
And after the REDC presentation, the next step would be just to hear. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So the REDC would vote. They send those votes anonymously to the state, and then the governor would make the announcements on her timeline.
And you also mentioned yesterday the REDC may be virtual, and who would be at that presentation?
So it would be an executive session, so it would just be the actual presenters would be at that. Now, that's how it was done previously. I'm not sure how they're going to do it under Governor Hochul's leadership, but I will let you guys know when I hear what.
So you don't know yet. So
do not
presenters
know.
being you and.
Right now, we're talking about the presenters being myself, the mayor, and then some stakeholders on the street. We've already explored the idea with a couple of different business owners and gotten people to say whether they'd be comfortable presenting or not. We haven't finalized that list yet, but as I mentioned yesterday, as soon as the application goes in, the next step is pulling all that information into the presentation and building out the narrative that we'll be speaking about.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Mayor?
Good morning.
Remarks. Good morning.
How are you? So got some good news yesterday, which I'll share with the BLDC. The Binghamton Plaza, our efforts to get control of that for a public purpose took a big step forward as a U.S. judge dismissed the bankruptcy proceedings that had the Binghamton Plaza were in. So dismissing their Chapter 11 essentially was the shield, dismisses the shield that allowed them to not pay property taxes, not be subject to other fines, and not allow an eminent domain proceeding to move forward. With that now dismissed, our legal team is formulating its strategy. I won't get too much in the weeds on that in a public meeting, but we're looking forward to continuing and following through on what I said. But nonetheless, a huge win for the city and accountability for the property owners. The other thing, yesterday's IDA meeting, they adopted a 1-year extension of the Boscov's lease agreement. So a status quo, at least until April of next year. That doesn't mean that we're not doing things behind the scenes. LaChase at a previous meeting, I think the last one we had in person, were hired by the BLDC to do a analysis of the construction estimates. They've walked that building from basement to roof, along with Boscov's folks, and have developed a really solid cost estimates on what they think would be needed. We've been presenting essentially a menu of options to Boscov's to talk about what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and how do we, as part of a hopefully 10+ year agreement to keep them where they're at, get those improvements made. So the ball right now is in Boscov's court. We've done our homework as it relates to that. We've opened up our playbook on what the costs are going to be. And, Jim Boscov attended the IDA meeting yesterday and spoke highly about the city and his willingness to stay and expand the store. So that remains really on the front burner. Myself and Sarah have been talking to Boscov's almost weekly, and that will continue to be a priority to get the upgrades needed for that store and get them on a long-term deal that the community needs as well. And that's all I had.
So I won't go through everything we've done in the past 2 months because I'll keep you here forever, but a couple of strategic announcements. The mayor with Ken Carney announced that there will be a mixed income development across from the stadium. It's the first major public investment in the stadium district aside from the stadium itself, aligns with what we're looking to do in the stadium district master plan. So they are advancing low-income housing tax credit applications for that site. The model has worked really well in other communities that are similar to ours and in similar transitional neighborhoods. So we're excited to see how that all plays out. The mayor also brought an application for Restore New York to City Council this week. It's an ask for $3 million from the state for the construction of a new affordable housing complex on Clinton Street. This project will also be noted in our DRI application. It's a 102 unit affordable housing complex. It's about $41.2 million financed through low-income housing tax credits, brownfield cleanup program, and ideally this allocation from Restore New York. The card conditional adult use retail dispensary applications launched, I believe, 2 weeks ago. They closed on the 26th. We've had at least one community member reach out and indicate that he has applied. I've spoken with him. I think he's a fantastic applicant. I'm optimistic that his application will be well received and that we'll receive one of the first conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses in the city of Binghamton. He's very committed to the area. We are also, as a board, sponsoring, as the BLDC, sponsoring a cannabis workforce fair on Saturday. That's in coordination with the Department of Labor and their consultant, New York Cannabis Connect. Stizzy, who, as you all remember, signed our option agreement back in July, will be there. They're a main sponsor. We see it as an exciting step that they are coming to the area looking for people who would potentially want to work at their facility, that they're making an investment in New York and specifically in Binghamton. So we'd be excited to talk to them this weekend, see where they are in their licensing, and we'll keep you up to date on how that is all going. And then one last thing, I'd like to let you know what we're doing with BLDC funds. We did sponsor an ad at the Dick's Open this year. So if you were there, you probably saw it up on the Jumbotron. I thought it looked great. Dara doesn't love it. So we'll be adjusting it for next year, but my PowerPoint skills, I still think are unmatched in
It was
developing.
a good message. And anecdotally, I got a lot of people asking me about it. They saw it basically City of Binghamton open for business. So
Okay, nice.
it's kind of one of the flagship events in Broome County. I thought that it would be important that BLDC fly the flag, even if it was an Endicott.
Get them from there over to
That's
here.
right.
Absolutely. So those are the high level results. The one thing I really want to highlight is Rachel has been working very, very hard on getting the Rennia loan funds out the door. So I believe as of Monday,
Yes.
our first loan of this existing board and this administration has gone out the door for support on their project on State Street that will support Broome County Arts Council in moving to the street. They've already made some hires in anticipation of having a larger space and having a bigger footprint. So we are very excited about that, and I'm very grateful to Rachel for all of her work on that.
And Brian for all of his work.
Yeah, yes,
Richard did a lot of it.
absolutely. And then, as you all might know, the Columbus Day Parade is coming up. That consumes much of Joel's fall every year, and we're very appreciative to him for organizing all of that. So hope to see you guys there if you're able to come. We'll send out invitations a little bit closer to the event. I've actually never been before, so I'm excited to be there for the first time. Any questions on anything we're doing in the office?
Okay, hearing none. Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.